Good morning, everyone. As Phil said, my name is Eros Evans, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Airwave. I'm just going to talk a little bit about my perception of an operator's requirements of a future network. I'll try and keep it really high level. I'm not going to try and get into any sort of real detail. I just want to try and give you my views and thoughts. So I'm going to start with the blindingly obvious, and I'll make no apologies for that. I think the first thing to say is we mustn't lose sight of the benefits that we have from the TETRA kind of capabilities that we have today. But that's not an exhaustive list, by the way, of mission-critical voice services. I've only put a few up there purely as an example. I just find it unthinkable to think about a solution which is focused purely on delivering data. So voice will remain a mission-critical service. But what I would say, and perhaps I would say the same as Phil, but perhaps I might couch it slightly differently. I actually see data growing significantly in the future. I think we will use a lot more data. The words I'm trying to avoid in that sentence are the words broadband. I do think some users will need broadband, but I'm not entirely convinced, if I'm being quite frank with you all, that everybody needs broadband. But what people do need is a lot more data. That's perhaps data at an instant in time, or data used over an extended period of a shift, a day, a week, or a month. We mustn't lose sight of the fact that in TETRA today, we have low latency data, something that is mission critical. So it's not just purely about the bandwidth that's available, but actually about how quickly you can get the message there. And we saw some of that in Phil's presentation earlier on. But actually look into the future, and this is perhaps where we might have a slightly different view. You know, I believe that actually voice and data will actually converge far more than just from a technology perspective. I think from an end user perspective, we will also see them converge. I think we will get to the point where somebody issuing a push to talk might actually initiate data services at the same time. It's not inconceivable, for example, that if somebody hits the emergency button, why wouldn't you open up the data channel at the same time? So that actually you can see what's going on in and around that individual. So even if the person is unable to talk, you can actually open up the data channel. So actually I think these two things will come together. What about from an operator's perspective? And I promise to keep this really high level. Here are some of the challenges that I see with today's technology and some of the things that I'd like to try and see addressed in the future. We all know it's possible to uplift coverage during a major event. That could be a planned or an unplanned event. And that's something that we can actually do today. We can also increase capacity, but neither of those items are really that easy to deliver in today's technology. It's very easy to actually deploy the physical equipment, but to actually think about the environment that you're putting it into, how to get the spectrum coordinated, define the network with its adjacent sites, etc., is quite a complex activity. In the future, we must move to a capability where the users are able to self-deploy. They don't need to talk to the operator about what they want to do. They're the first on scene. They've got that golden hour under their control. We've got to move to a position where those users can actually deploy the additional capacity and the coverage they need themselves. I think that would be a big step forward. And for us in Airwave, I can talk about Airwave for hours, so I must be careful. But you know, I think a number of you saw Peter Goulding's presentation yesterday. You know, London is a significant challenge, make no mistake. You know, huge capacity demands, significant major events. And what we must move to, and I've tried to cover this on the bullet at the bottom, is we've got to move to a point where the network decides where the terminals connect to, not the terminals. And this is really fundamental. This is really important. Today's challenge is that as the terminals move to a single location, such as a New Year's Eve type event, all those terminals around that event will typically congregate around one or two sites. And those sites become exceptionally busy. Despite the fact that those radios can see other sites, they will go to that site, and that causes major congestion issues. Now, there are things that we can do as operators to try and mitigate that and try and force the terminals to go elsewhere, effectively softening the load on the network. But it is things that we have to do. in a 3G PPP type of environment, the network is intelligent, far more intelligent, and able to decide and actually spread the load amongst the network without having to leave all of the intelligence to the terminal. And if you put these things together, then you start talking about concepts such as self-organizing networks, which we now see in the latest technologies that the mobile network operators use. And you start to move towards the capability where the traffic is decided by the network and not just by the device. Perhaps slightly controversially, but I listened to Phil's presentation, and I guess what I would say, and I'm going to take a few liberties on this slide, we can't ignore costs. I don't believe there are many countries around the world swimming in cash. And so, you know, the cost associated with deploying multiple networks is immense, even when deploying additional patch coverage. So actually, I think moving to a single network that can deliver both voice and data capabilities is a critical step. Not in the near term, but in the long-term future. That is where that's where we have to migrate to. But we have to retain all of those services that we talked about at the beginning. We have to be able to retain the mission-critical voice, the low-latency data, but also deliver all those other data applications. We have to do so, and we have to do so in a standardized way. If we haven't got the standards, then we lose all of the benefits that we have today from such a large user community, many of you in here today, where we can actually truly leverage the market, drive competition, drive the R&D that we require. And of course, spectrum is one of the key debates in that whole piece. And I think there's a number of sessions later on this morning where that will be discussed. If we can get the spectrum and we can get the technology standards driven, then I believe this is the shape of the future.